Happy Thursday! Okay, we are back and we're going to read chapter 6 of Woods Runner. So the book is getting good, if I do say so myself. Go ahead and open the Google Doc and I will read you the questions so that way you know what to listen for as we are reading. This chapter isn't too long. And then remember, we are going to do those in between sections tomorrow. So, questions for chapter 6. Number 1, what did Samuel learn from the tracks? Number 2, what was the name of the next settlement? Number 3, what is most likely the reason why old Bobby was still alive when Samuel found him? And number 4, it says compare and contrast. How are Samuel and old Bobby similar? How are they different? So please remember to use complete sentences. So you would say for number 1, something Samuel learned from the tracks was, number 4, you could say one way that Samuel and old Bobby are similar is blah, 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 blah. One way that Samuel and old Bobby are different is blah, 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 blah. So, be sure you're using full sentences. Hopefully you have already answered the social studies question from the vocabulary. And that one says, what are 3 things you learned about in this video? So that's not too hard at all. Make sure that those are complete sentences as well. Okay, chapter 6. As he walked, Samuel felt as if he were following some kind of a killing storm. Even the tracks seemed savage. From the footprints, it was evident that the prisoners, tied together, were constantly jerked and pulled to increase their speed. Their prints were scuffed, ragged, and he felt his mother's anguish terribly. She was small and thin and very strong in her own way, but this brutal treatment, probably with a rope around her neck, might be too much for her. If she was too slow, he could not even finish the thought. The shock Samuel felt since he'd come upon the devastation in the settlement and dealt with the bodies had left him numb. Now it turned to anger, coming into rage, and that was worse because he had to remain calm. He had no idea what to do except follow his parents' tracks. He saw their footprints now and then. He had to follow and rescue them. How could he do that? Free his parents? He'd have to wait and see. Wait until he knew more. He would learn by studying sign. He could not forget himself and his skills now. The people who were leaving the tracks were the people he had to deal with. He had to understand them by the time he caught up with them. He stopped and tried to slow his harsh breathing, tried to still his mind and remember all he had taught himself about studying trails and the surrounding ground. It seemed that all of the captors and captives were walking on the trail, but there might be others off to the side. Quickly, he started to swing to the left and to the right of the trail. It was mostly grass and hard to read, but at last he saw scuff marks and some moccasin tracks in open dirt. They had scouts on each side of the main group. On the second swing, he found the first body. It was a man in his 30s who'd been picking berries when they had come upon him. He must have had a rifle or a musket. No one would be out in the woods without some kind of weapon. But it was gone, along with his powder horn and Possible's bag. They had been scalped, mutilated. Sadly, there was no time for Samuel to give him a decent grave. He scraped a slight trench with his knife and covered the body with a minimum of dirt. He bowed his head and then went back to the trail. Covering the body hadn't taken much time, but it upset him. As he walked on, he tried to still the shaking of his hands. He picked up his speed and came into the clearing of the next settlement before he was ready for it. He thought he knew what he would find. It was just a few cabins, but unlike Samuel's home, it had a name, Draper's Crossing. And it was gone. At first, it seemed the same devastation he had found at home, smoke rising from burnt cabins and sheds, but when he stopped, he saw he wasn't alone. On the southern side of the clearing, there was a figure. It was an old man. As Samuel approached, he saw that the man was spading dirt with a wooden shovel into a mound that was clearing a grave. He was singing, "Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee." Samuel stopped 10 yards away. He saw no weapon, but he stood ready, rifle held across his chest, thumb on the hammer. As the old man patted the dirt with the shovel, Samuel could see 4 other grave mounds where the cabins had been. The man, in a sing-songy voice, "There to sleepy, little darling, there to sleepy with the Jesus boy. All to sleepy, little darling, all to sleepy with the Jesus boy." Samuel coughed, but the old man did not turn. Jesus came, and the Jesus boy came, and took them all up to heaven. "How long ago were they here?" Samuel finally interrupted the man's song. The man turned toward Samuel and kept up his singing. "Lordy, then the Jesus boy came, and took them all to heaven. There was Draper and Molly, and they came in, and took them all to the Jesus boy." "How long ago? Can you tell me when they were here?" "In the dark they came, took them all to the Jesus boy. Took them all, but not old Bobby. No, sir, didn't take old Bobby, 'cause old Bobby sat eating dirt and pointing up at the Jesus boy, talking through his ear holes, and they thinking old Bobby was ticked, but it wasn't so, wasn't so, wasn't so. Water, is there water or food here? Wasn't ticked at all. Just knew how the Jesus boy could save us, so I sat there eating dirt and laughing and praying." With piercing, intense, and otherworldly green eyes, he stared, but not at Samuel. He looked through Samuel at some far place that he could only see, he could only know. He picked up the shovel and started walking off to the south, where Samuel could see one more burned cabin. Beside it lay what looked to be a pile of rags, but Samuel knew it wasn't. One more body. Now he remembered something he had heard about the Indians. Considering that he had lived his whole life on the frontier, he knew very little about them. But what he did know, he had learned from listening to adults, to rumors and stories they sometimes told after they had a little too much hard cider or blackstrap rum. He remembered that some tribes saw crazy people as graced by the higher power, and that they believed that old people who did not think straight should be protected, or at least should not be harmed. Which must be why they had let old Bobby go. "Maybe he's crazy," Samuel said out loud, watching him walk away with the shovel. "Maybe not. Either way, he's alive." He turned back to the trail. If old Bobby was right, they had come in the dark, probably just before dawn, if they had stopped to rest at all. That meant Samuel was gaining, and that meant he had to keep moving. So that is the end of chapter 6. It's getting good, it's getting good. So we will read those in-between sections to get some more background knowledge of the stuff we have read this week tomorrow, and I will see you guys then.